Welcome to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll, and this is the healthiest half hour anywhere online today. Appreciate you joining us right here on Facebook and on YouTube. Coming up, let's beat breast cancer today, kicking off our campaign to beat the disease that can strike our mothers, our daughters, our sisters, our wives, our friends, and our loved ones. So to get everything rolling for us this month to help us beat breast cancer, we are welcoming one of the leading voices on prevention in the entire world, the one and only Dr. Kristi Funk. Dr. Funk, thank you so very much for joining us today. Can't wait to talk with you.
Great. Thanks for having me. I got my t-shirt on.
You do? I'm loving it. Fresh off of the GMA appearance this morning, too.
Yes. All right. We're going to learn how to beat breast cancer with Chuck.
All right, stick around. We are going to learn how to beat breast cancer indeed. And by the way, if you have a question for Dr. Funk, go ahead, post that in the comments section now. We're going to be opening up the doctor's mailbag in just a little while. You can also tweet them to us using the hashtag ExamRoomLive. But before we go any further, let's get a check on what's happening in the world. Here are your health headlines for Thursday, October 1st. 2020. The coronavirus case count in the U.S. now standing at 7.25 million, with nearly 43,000 new cases reported Wednesday. Texas, California, and Wisconsin, the three states with the highest numbers. The rate of new infections up more than 10% over the last 2 weeks. And more on the effect that COVID is having on breast cancer in a moment with Dr. Funk. In other news, a new study is kicking up controversy about intermittent fasting for weight loss. Researchers at the University of California, San Francisco studied 116 adults, finding those who fasted 16 hours a day lost only about 2 pounds over the course of 12 weeks, while the group who ate at regular intervals, they lost just a half pound less while eating virtually the same amount of calories. Researchers say there was also little difference between the group's A1C levels and other biomarkers. And finally, today, Irish eyes are definitely not smiling on Subway after Ireland's Supreme Court ruled the popular sandwich chain's bread does not meet the legal definition of bread. The High Court ruling that the recipe is just too sugary to actually be considered bread. In fact, the 5-judge panel finds the amount of sugar found in the bread to make Subway's heated sandwiches is 5 times higher than the country's legal standard, a standard that was set nearly 50 years ago to distinguish bread from other baked goods, such as pastries. There's a legal standard for that. That is fantastic. All right, moving on. Today, we are launching our Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign 2020. All month long, we will be working with you. We will be working for you to lower the risk of being one of 8 women who will be diagnosed with it during their lifetime. My guest today is someone who has devoted her life to helping others beat breast cancer. She is a renowned surgeon, the author of the best-selling book, Breasts, the Owner's Manual, and she is a friend of the show and a friend of mine. She is the fabulous, the funktastic Dr. Kristi Funk. Dr. Funk, again, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Chunkalicious.
Chunkalicious, goodness gracious sake. All right, that's a new one. So right off the top, I think that we should explain that we've established over the year or so that we've been doing these shows together that we play the name game. And, what creative and clever ways can we come up with a nickname for the other person? And we're getting pretty deep in the game here. So I think that, we need to hit pause on this for the rest of today.
Okay.
We're going to come back. We still got a series of podcasts that we're going to be doing all month long. Let's save the names for there. It'll give us an opportunity to really jot some stuff down and think about it. And then we'll come strong.
I like it.
But let's get serious. Let's beat breast cancer. 1 out of every 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer during their lifetime here in the U.S. What are the actual stats there beyond that? How many cases a year are we seeing?
There's about 250,000 invasive breast cancers, another 60,000 in situ cancers every year in America. However, not to jump the gun here, you're not going to be seeing it like that this year because of COVID. So because of fear, women are not screening as much. In fact, the stats prove that compared to pre-COVID numbers, screening is down 62%. Genetic consults down 26%, breast surgery down 21%, and most frighteningly of all, the August stats showed a 52% drop in invasive breast cancer. And that is shocking and worrisome because I just gave you a big number of 250,000 women getting diagnosed this year, but they're not getting diagnosed. Apparently, half of them, we'll kind of give it a little leeway because COVID craze and decrease in screening didn't really drop until April, but we're looking at a good 100,000 invasive breast cancers going undiagnosed this year that are not sheltering in place, that are not in quarantine. They are multiplying and dividing, and it's all getting exacerbated by women unwittingly embracing the very nutrition and lifestyle behaviors that we know, scientifically know, create breast cancer and increased recurrence and death from breast cancer. So it's a double whammy that this whole COVID thing is packing, and it has me very worried.
So what are the risks then for postponing getting a mammogram or getting diagnosed or just leaving it untreated for a year? What can happen in just the span of 12 months?
It depends entirely on the inherent biology of the cancer. So truth be told, you can have an indolent, lazy, plodding along, kind of estrogen-driven, what I call a little old lady cancer. We identify these by something called the Ki-67, among other factors. But the Ki-67 is literally the division rate. It answers the question, what percentage of cells under the microscope are actively dividing right now? So if it's something under 10%, that means that a 1 centimeter cancer, to keep our math simple, is going to be 1.1 centimeters, so 10% larger in about 6 months. That's not going to have a huge impact. On the flip side, you can definitely get, on the opposite spectrum, a triple negative cancer with a division rate of 80%. And what was stage 1 is now going to be stage 2. What was stage 2, stage 3, and everything becomes a little more difficult to treat and cure. What could have been a lumpectomy might become a mastectomy. What didn't need chemo might need chemo. So this delay is going to translate into a frightening bump in slightly larger stage cancers being diagnosed in the next 1 to 10 years and an increase in cancer death just because of the delay.
Before we get to ways that we can prevent breast cancer, our 4-step approach here, let's dive a little bit deeper into fact versus fiction here. There is a big belief in among women that breast cancer is inherently a genetic disease. If your mother had it, your grandmother had it, you're going to have it, and there's not a whole lot that you can do about it. But one of the things that I've learned over the course of speaking with you is that genetics don't make up a huge percentage of actual cases.
They certainly don't. So only 5 to 10% of all breast cancer is coming from an inherited genetic mutation, such as BRCA or CHEK2, that you can inherit from mom or dad's side. And we have to give that gene respect. When people do have that inherited mutation, they have up to 87% chance of lifetime breast cancer, up to 54% chance of ovarian cancer, depending on what gene we're talking about. So yes, it is responsible for cancers when they happen, but it's a very small subset. The vast majority of cancers come from our daily choices regarding diet and lifestyle.
And so let's stick with those who unfortunately do have that BRCA gene and have that high risk of it. Suppose then that they follow the 4 steps that we are going to talk about here. Are there still ways that they can reduce their risk of not being one of those 87% women who will develop breast cancer?
There are, but the studies are so cherry picked, right? There's not a lot of dedicated intervention for these gene mutation carriers on the diet and lifestyle front to really hang your hat on it, because these gene mutations are so pervasive with the cancer penetrance. But I will share with you a couple of studies that are like, boom, eyes wide open. There was one Korean study in BRCA, BRCA carriers, and they compared high versus low soy consumption during adolescence. And these BRCA mutation carriers with high soy consumption had 57% less breast cancer. And that's a shocking drop for someone who's supposed to be at the complete mercy of these DNA breaks and inability to repair them. Another study in BRCA carriers looked at coffee consumption. And while that may cause breast pain and swelling, it doesn't cause breast cancer. And in fact, in BRCA carriers, those who consume 5 cups or more a day, they too had about a 40% drop in breast cancer. So there are behaviors and dietary changes that can lead to a drop, but I don't think there's enough out there in the literature to hang your hat on and tell a woman like, oh, you don't need the increased surveillance that we're talking about, or no, it's ridiculous to consider prophylactic mastectomy. We're just not there yet.
Well, you mentioned soy there, and I think that's something that commonly gets thrown around. A lot of women, try to put a great deal of distance between their dinner plates and soy because they do feel like that will increase the risk of cancer. But you just cited a study that said that, hey, adolescent women who eat soy, they cut their chance of having it by what did you say, 57%? So what is the truth about soy and cancer risk?
So the truth is that soy is not just okay to have, it's protective. It literally, in different studies, will show a between 30 and 60% drop in breast cancer happening. And then in our patients with breast cancer, either on tamoxifen or not, high versus low soy consumers will literally have between 30 and 60% less breast cancer recurrence. And across the board, it's always like 29 to 32% drop in breast cancer death in high soy consumption. So the misconception comes from the reality that, yes, there are isoflavones in soy, like genistein, which are phytoestrogens, plant-based estrogens that look like chemically estrogens. So even sorry about this, embarrassingly wrong, for 17 years, I told women with breast cancer, particularly estrogen-driven, just spit that miso out of your mouth. You cannot love soy that much that you have to consume it. We don't know what it's doing in your body. Oops. When I finally dove into the science to really look at what soy was doing, turns out there's two receptors in your body, alpha and beta. Soy preferentially with 1600% more affinity, it's beta. And what it does there is it shuts alpha down. Alpha is the receptor attached to those breast cancer cells, making them multiply and divide. So soy, in effect, acts like the very drugs we give breast cancer patients to inactivate the alpha estrogen receptors. So soy it up.
I love that. That should be a hashtag at the very least. Soy it up. I love that. Let's talk about the Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign, because you have worked to develop a 4-step approach to beating breast cancer. And step 1 is eating a plant-based diet. How specifically is a plant-based diet beneficial for reducing the risk of developing breast cancer?
A plant-based diet is two things. You're not only chewing and swallowing and then allowing these plant-based chemicals to get into your bloodstream, flying through your body, saturating cells with anti-cancer properties that have very chemical sounding names, but you probably know a few of them, at least, like the curcumin in turmeric, or the EGCG in green tea. But these are chemicals that exert the opposite of what cancer requires in order to maintain its existence inside your body. Anti-estrogen, anti-growth factor, anti-inflammatory, and critically anti-angiogenic. That's a big word. Angio, blood vessel genesis, creation, the creation of new blood flow. For a cancer to develop beyond the size of literally like a pinpoint of a ballpoint pen, it requires its own blood supply. And so it sends out like little chemotactic agents to bring that blood flow, these little vessels to it. But these foods, when you consume them, particularly, your leafy greens and cruciferous vegetables, soy that we talked about, berries, mushrooms, the allium family with scallions and onions, all of these foods have chemicals inside of them that squash a cancer cell's ability to create these mechanisms that it needs. So without them, it peters out and dies. Now, conversely, when you're consuming mostly plants, you're not consuming any or many animal products. Animal protein and animal fat does the exact opposite. It gives that cancer everything it needs. It's pro-estrogenic. It increases growth factors. It increases the blood vessel formation, inflammation, oxidative stress, and so on, so that cancer can really flourish in that microenvironment. So, of course, the first prong in our 4-pronged approach to beating breast cancer, yet it's like four prongs, is to choose plant-based foods always.
But a lot of people will make the argument, though, that fish is healthy, chicken is healthy. They can't possibly be unhealthy in terms of this. But what do we know when it comes to those?
There's a few things to think about with more innocent or seemingly innocent meats, such as chicken and turkey and fish. They've been kind of replacing red meat as red meat has become more vilified, appropriately so, and people recognize that. They're not wanting to give up their meat proteins, though, so they're turning to these leaner types. But there's a world of trouble in there. First of all, it's still animal protein, people, so that cellular response I just described is happening just the same as if that had been a big slice of beef. And the second thing is that you're probably not eating chicken tartare. You're probably cooking it. And whenever you cook meat, either grill it and burn it or slow cook it in the oven at 30 degrees for 30 minutes. I don't even remember. I haven't cooked chicken in a billion years, but however, whatever degrees, 375 for 30 minutes. The creatine in meat combined with the heat, whether the high heat in the grill, which some people think that's the only carcinogen, it's forming also from your oven cooking. That creatine in meat and the heat create polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons and heterocyclic amines, the big daddy of them all in meat called PHIP, P-H-I-P, are all very well-studied carcinogens that increase breast cancer risk. So you're not escaping those things. You're not escaping what's in the meat just naturally, like cholesterol and saturated fat, not at all good for you. In fact, cancer cells gobble up LDL cholesterol for lunch. So that's something to avoid. And furthermore, what's not in the meat? You're not getting one fiber of fiber, and you're not getting any of the phytonutrients that phyto only come from plants. There's a lot of trouble with the more innocent sounding meats like chicken and fish.
All right. Step number 2 in the 4-step approach, the 4-pronged approach. Exercise. How does that factor in here? Lacing up the sneakers, going for a walk, going for a run.
Yeah, well, it factors in quite a bit because what you're doing is you're lowering estrogen levels for the most part. That's the mechanism by which exercise directly decreases breast cancer, but you're also decreasing stress. And we'll get into stress a little bit today. I think it's not one of the 4 prongs, but it is a big one. And all of the 4 prongs do directly and indirectly affect stress. And there's such a strong mind-body connection that literally translates into the inflammation and acidity and microenvironment in our bodies. And exercise creates a healthier microenvironment on that level by decreasing stress. But let me give you some of these stats because they're like, really? All right. Those who are sedentary have 30 to 40% more breast cancer over those who bust and move for 3 to 4 hours a week. So some people are like, yeah, okay, well, I'll never bust a move for that long. Well, there's another huge study, 74,000 postmenopausal women who just briskly walked for 11 minutes a day, 11 to 21, technically, minutes a day, and they had an 18% drop in breast cancer. So even just sauntering quickly is going to confer a benefit. There's no reason not to just move more, like put a little bit of dancing into your dusting and your other household chores. I love desk treadmills so you can walk slowly while you're working on that computer. COVID has really exacerbated this problem because people are working from home more than ever. So they're sitting more than they ever have, and their kitchen is right there, and they are prone to snacking. So even when you're obese, the combination of walking 30 minutes a day, walking now, consuming 5 or more servings of daily vegetables confers a 44% survival advantage over those who adhere to one or neither of those things. So walking 30 minutes a day and eating 5 or more servings of daily vegetables.
All right. Step number 3, quick story to go into this. Dr. Barnard actually famously tells the story of being on a flight and looking through the menu and seeing a drink that is being served. It's a pink martini in support of breast cancer research. But then wait a minute, a pink martini. But the 3rd step in our approach here is actually limiting alcohol. So what do we know there?
We know a lot. So alcohol weakens your immune system. It increases estrogen levels, and estrogen is the fuel behind 80% of all breast cancers. It creates a carcinogen called acetaldehyde, which is very potent, and it inactivates an enzyme called MTHFR, or methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. And what that enzyme does is it converts folic acid from a vitamin or folate in your leafy greens into methylfolate. Methylfolate runs around and fixes DNA when it goes awry. 30 to 50% of people genetically have a suboptimal MTHFR. So they're already not converting well to methylfolate, which is required to fix DNA mutations. And then you layer on some alcohol there, the enzyme's done for the day. So there are multiple mechanisms by which alcohol increases breast cancer. How much does it increase it by? Studies vary, of course, but they all point to an alarming trend. The more you drink, the higher the risk goes. So a drink is a 12-ounce can of beer equals 1.5 ounces of hard liquor equals 5 ounces of wine, and people pour a lot more than that in their wine glasses. A drink a day increases breast cancer by 10%. 2 drinks a day, 30%. 3 drinks a day, 40%, and it just goes upwards from there. So one of the solutions that we like to advocate for in our Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign is to sub out whatever you're wanting to drink for a mocktail. And there are really a number of fabulous recipes online. We have a bunch at pinklotus.com/kitchen in our Cancer Kicking Kitchen. And we send you some too in the newsletters that you'll get after you sign up for the campaign. But a mocktail can just, especially if you put it in the glass you're used to drinking. So you already have an association between that feeling you want and the glass in your hand. So instead of putting wine, if you put some fun mixture of, if it's a red wine, some cranberry juice and other juices with a little sprig of mint, and you put that in there, you're feeling fancy. And I really think that if people understand the risks of alcohol, they will be motivated to swap out those cocktails for mocktails.
And the final step in the 4-step approach is maintaining a healthy weight. So obesity, how does that increase the risk of a woman developing breast cancer?
Overweight and obese women have literally between 50 and 250% more breast cancer occurrence, recurrence, and death than their normal weight counterparts. And the main driver from that is simply the fat itself. Everywhere you have a fat cell, you've got an enzyme called aromatase. Aromatase is busy all day long churning away precursor hormones, largely from your adrenal gland, like androstenedione and testosterone, into estrogen. And as I already said in passing, estrogen feeds and fuels 80% of all breast cancers. So, point in fact, obese women do have higher levels of circulating estrogen. Next fact has to be proven. Do obese women, though, have higher levels of postmenopausal breast cancer? To answer that, you've got to look at lots of postmenopausal women who are not on hormone replacement therapy, which would be a confounding factor in elevating estrogen. And we're looking at them after menopause so that we can get rid of the ovary contribution to estrogen. And it's now just a pure fat-driven contribution. And in these studies, even gaining 29 pounds since high school will double your rate of breast cancer, 100% increase. And as I already said, the stats vary from 50 to 250%, but always overweight and obese individuals, of which 72% of Americans are, contributes to breast cancer causation and progression. Now, sorry, but the happy guys, you got to end on a happy note. You lose the weight, you lose the risk. And that is a beautiful thing.
Oh, that's huge. That's absolutely huge to know. So here's the deal. If you have a question for Dr. Funk, go ahead, post that in the comments section. Now we're going to be opening up the doctor's mailbag in just a little bit. But while you are getting those questions, stuffing that mailbag, so to speak, I want to ask you, Dr. Funk, a lot of people say, okay, well, if there's 1 or 2 foods that I should really be focusing on, really want to make sure that they get on my plate, are there some that you can share with the viewers right now?
The 2 big daddies that I want to see you eating every single day are cruciferous vegetables and flax seeds, ground flax seeds, 2 tablespoons a day. The cruciferous veggie family you're probably well familiar with, but we're talking about broccoli and broccoli sprouts, kale, cabbage, cauliflower, bok choy, collard greens, all those leafy greens, and the cruciferous little cabbage heads, Brussels sprouts. These foods pack such a punch. Cancer kind of has no chance against them. I want to qualify that, though. An already formed invasive cancer is probably not going to be killed off very readily by kale. It's had its sinister moves going a solid 5 to 10 years before you came upon its existence. So you're very late to the game in this battle against breast cancer if that's where you are. I'm not a big proponent of treating breast cancer solely with alternative means and with food and nutrition. That is not going to lead to a cure most of the time. You might get after that super lazy plodding cancer, but beyond that, like I'm saying, please don't try that. Let's do it together. It's complementary. Changing your diet radically and lifestyle intervention complements other interventions that we know can lead to a cure.
All right. Now, let's go ahead and open up that doctor's mailbag. The first question comes to us from Edith at 1211. She's been waiting on this one. She wants to know, do you recommend hormone replacement therapy, or do you suggest that women avoid this?
What a great question, because it's a ubiquitous decision that happens to everyone who's around 51 and 10 months, which is the average age of menopause. So here's the deal. It's an individualized conversation. There's no question that hormone replacement therapy leads to breast cancer. Now, whether or not you're using a progesterone in that will influence the rate of cancer. But all told, if you put 143 women on hormone replacement, you will cause one breast cancer that didn't need to happen. And maybe that doesn't sound a lot, but when you extrapolate that to the 6 million women on HRT right now, that's a solid 41,000 invasive breast cancers that don't have to happen year after year. So I do encourage people to first explore why they want to be on hormones, and then are there alternatives? First and foremost, if it's like, say, bone density, well, that's not a good enough reason in my opinion. You could just be doing weight-bearing exercises and taking bisphosphonate. Menopause Miracle is far and away the best thing I've ever stumbled across that is safe, even for breast cancer patients. It has 3 randomized controlled trials behind it, proving its efficacy and its safety. It does not elevate estrogen levels, and it works like in over 90% of women, not just on hot flashes, but all of the craziness: thinning hair, dry skin, decreased libido, vaginal dryness, mood swings, insomnia. So I would try Menopause Miracle. I would try acupuncture. I would beef up, not really beef, your soy consumption, because that has some vasomotor tempering properties so that you have fewer hot flashes. There's a lot to explore before you just leap into something that we know is ultimately carcinogenic.
Next question comes to us from Tracy at 1226. What are your thoughts on supplements like curcumin, reishi, and vitamin D?
Different thoughts for different supplements. Vitamin D is a must. If it's low, you need to get that into its proper range, which is like 20 to 40 nanograms per deciliter. So you have to have that drawn in a blood draw to be sure where you are. Living in Southern California, I get my 12 minutes of sunshine without sunscreen every day. So my vitamin D is fine. But most people, especially north or south of 40 degrees latitude, they need to supplement with something around 5,000 IU a day. So get your blood levels checked and certainly supplement with D if you need it. All breast cancer patients, that is a mandatory blood check, because low vitamin D is associated with higher recurrence and death. The other things like curcumin, this is a bit gimmicky. You should just be sprinkling turmeric. By the way, when turmeric and curcumin go head to head in their anti-cancer properties in a breast cancer plated Petri dish, turmeric wins every time. So you're missing out on some other magical properties that we're not sure about. But when big supplement companies get their hands on some data, they're like, oh, the curcumin's magic. Let's extract it. Let's put it in a pill, and everybody can just take that. You really should just cook with these things. You really should just eat your isothiocyanates, right? The sulforaphane, that's a sexy one to be putting in supplements all day long right now. So sulforaphane is the big anti-cancer agent that's coming from your broccoli and the broccoli sprouts. And now they just extract it and putting it in tablets. But you should be able to eat all of those. And we really don't have any studies that are showing that it's as powerful powderized and put into a capsule as it would have been if you had just eaten those sprouts on your salad.
All right. Interesting question from Viviani at 1226. Can diet or food reduce breast density?
Oh, it can, because part of breast density has to do with estrogen influence. So if you're eating anti-estrogenically, you're going to decrease your breast density. So specific foods that act like anti-estrogens in your body, I'm like a drum now, beating the soy drum, but soy will do it, and as will cruciferous vegetables. Citrus also does it. Mushrooms, but of all the mushrooms, the one that has the most anti-aromatase activity, that's that fat cell enzyme making the estrogen for you, the button mushroom. Fiber grabs onto estrogen in your GI tract and makes you poop it out. So all of those are really great foods to be consuming. And I'm sure there are other properties that are just unstudied in our plant-based world that are doing the exact same thing. So for sure, eating plant-based will decrease your breast density, or it can.
All right, let's ask a question that definitely falls under the lifestyle category. This one from Denise at 1226. I've read information on going braless helps prevent breast cancer. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that is misinformation, and it comes from the idea that perhaps a bra that's maybe too tight is constricting, and the lymphatic drainage can't happen so readily, and lymph fluid is toxic. So maybe it kind of seeps out into the breast tissue and then behaves as a carcinogen there. But not true. In part, when people have breast lymphedema after surgery or radiation, they've got a buildup of lymph in their breast. We treat it in part with compression. So that's not a reason. Another reason is sometimes people worry that there's electromagnetic fields maybe being conducted by the underwire in a bra, but that doesn't turn out to be true or have any impact. So, but if you feel good going braless, there's no like health benefit to wearing a bra. So, but if you're flopping around and uncomfortable in the name of staving off breast cancer, you can put your bra back on.
All right. Question from Rebecca at 1229. I just got my mammogram results yesterday. I'm normal, but have extremely dense breasts. Should I be concerned?
Yes and no. I want you to be notified that this is an increased risk factor for you, but there are easy steps to take to mitigate that risk. So basically, density is graded A through D. If it really did say extremely dense, then you're a D. Only 10% of women are extremely. 40% are a C, which is moderately dense, and then the other 50% of women are A and B, which is more fat than there is dense breast tissue. The problem with density is twofold. Number one, what makes a mammogram look dense, like a white splotchy snowstorm, are the breast elements that actually make breast cancer, breast lobules and milk ducts. So the more of that you have in your image, the more potential cancer could be made. Breast cancer doesn't happen in the fat. Furthermore, cancer is always white. So now you're looking for a snowball in a snowstorm, and the densest of breasts can have up to 50% of their breast cancers missed on mammogram alone. So the two workarounds for this are, for starters, you want to get a 3D mammogram, also called tomosynthesis, or tomo, if you're cool. Just get a 3D tomo. This mammogram, instead of just getting squashed and looking at the image, you have the same experience. You're squashed and there's some radiation, actually more than the normal. But what we see are about 15 to 30 slices through that breast. So suddenly, if that breast had been like a loaf of raisin bread, all the raisins are popping out. In fact, big study shows that dense breasts, 3D mammo versus the standard 2D, 34% breast cancer detection with 17% fewer callbacks for false positives. Part two, if you're dense breasted, you want to consider getting a whole breast screening ultrasound. Ultrasound sees cancers as black or gray, whereas the breast tissue still stays white. So they tend to pop out more on ultrasound. The combination of 2D and screening ultrasound is just as good and possibly better than 3D mammo. So there's a big study that shows a bunch of 2D mammogram, 3,000 people, normal 2D mammogram, everybody gets a 3D, everybody gets a screening ultrasound. The 3D mammo found 4 more cancers that were missed, but ultrasound found 7. So if your insurance doesn't pay for the 3D, or if the closest machine is 75 miles away, just add ultrasound and insurance should cover it.
All right. I want to ask 2 more good ones because I think a lot of people are wondering these. And then I want to talk to you about your Cancer Kicking Summit. So really quickly, Dex at 1232 wants to know, what about a ketogenic diet on breast cancer or cancer in general? What effect does that have?
So ketogenic diets are largely animal-based. So that's going to have a very negative impact on breast cancer. It's going to feed and fuel those cells and bring them everything they need, from cholesterol and saturated fat to inflammation and estrogen and IGF-1, the big daddy growth factor, insulin-like growth factor. So I'm vehemently against ketogenic diets. In the short run, they can and do produce weight loss for people, which can then improve diabetics because they lose the weight. And largely it's because they're shunning things that all whole food plant-based eaters should shun anyway, which is the ultra-processed snacky food like chips and cakes and bagels and the like. You can, of course, find vegan junk food in Oreos and French fries. So a ketogenic diet ultimately is going to be atherosclerotic plaque forming, and it will lead to elevated cholesterol levels that lead to an increase in heart attack and stroke and untimely death. Honestly, it's not a very sustainable diet.
Lots of great questions, but the final one comes to us from Alex at 1233, wants to know about sodium levels and breast cancer. Is there a correlation there?
Ooh, gosh, I have not heard that one. And I'm trying to think why sodium. Well, I mean, you're just thinking about salt intake, which, I'm going to have to research that one and get back to you. You have stumped me. I don't know anything, though, that definitely screams out about sodium being a problem, but I will look into that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I hadn't thought of either. And I kind of went back to what it was you were talking about with the keto diet and talking about some of the snacky, junkier foods and how they tend to have more sodium in them anyway. So perhaps just inherently by eating those types of foods, that would increase your risk. But I don't know. I
Right.
don't know. So I'm going to defer to you. But really quickly, your Cancer Kicking Summit. This is just an extraordinary event. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, what you have coming up?
Yes, the Cancer Kicking Summit. It's coming up virtually in April 2021 and live in person for 2 days at the gorgeous Oceanfront Terranea Resort in Southern California, October 16 and 17. So, God willing, COVID will be long gone, and that is the plan. So, this summit will transform your life. It is meant for every woman. It's not just a breast cancer patient that will derive life-transforming benefit from attending. Basically, we're going to deep dive into the soil of your life and look at a whole lot more than nutrition. We're going to weed out all the things that are unhealthy, whether it's negative thinking or negative activities, and we're going to plant 10 seeds in that newly fertilized soil. So you sprout into the most gorgeous, fruitful, bountiful existence possible. And I really have based everything that I teach in science. So it's all backed by rigorous research with proven results. And I just want to help people recognize that their life could be much more purposeful than it probably is. And it really can all happen and turn on a day or two's worth of insight. So please join me virtually, April 2021 or in person in October. The Cancer Kicking Summit. You can go to pinklotus.com/summit to read about it and sign up.
Just an absolutely extraordinary event. And Dr. Funk, this is all the time that we have for today's show, but you and I have quite a bit more business to do throughout the month of October. You're going to be with me on the Exam Room podcast every week throughout the month of October. Matter of fact, our first interview was just released this morning where you and I had the opportunity to do a really nice deep dive on the factors for breast cancer, the ones that can be controlled and the ones that are completely out of our control. But then we also, you did such an eloquent job explaining the risk in depth about processed meat, red meat, chicken, fish, all of that stuff with breast cancer. And then on the converse, again, more information on plant-based foods and really controlling those risk factors. And you even talked a little bit about the soil that is used to make produce the chicken and the meat. And you really, I mean, the research that you did was just, it's so extraordinary. And when you told me during that interview that you are rooted in science, I believe every bit of it because you brought the facts and you brought them strong.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah. So you can check that out at Apple Podcasts, wherever it is that you get your podcast from. Look for the Exam Room podcast by the Physicians Committee. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button and leave a 5-star rating. And Dr. Funk, thank you so very much for your time today. Appreciate you being here with us and being, just at the forefront of our Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign, helping us save lives. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Everybody go to letsbeatbreastcancer.org. Sign up now. Take the pledge.
Take the pledge. Get that free e-cookbook too. Let's not forget that. There are some delicious recipes in there. All right, Dr. Kristi Funk, check her out, pinklotus.com. Thank you so very much again.
Thanks. See you soon.
All right. Now, Pink Lotus, by the way, has been such an extraordinary sponsor for the Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign. And I also want to take a second to recognize some of our other great partners like Third Love and Vitamix. We want to say a huge thank you to them as well for helping us to share this life-saving message. For today, that is really all the time that we have. Coming up again tomorrow, we're going to be doing more with our Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign. We will be joined by dietitian Lee Crosby from the Barnard Medical Center. She'll be here to share her story with breast cancer. And we will also be looking deeper into foods and nutrition and everything that plays a role there in terms of breast cancer risk. So that is at noon Eastern, right back here on Facebook and on YouTube. Dr. Neil Barnard will also be here. Dr. Jim Loomis will also be here. And so we're going to put them together with the Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign. And we're going to do a big old bonanza for our Friday Doctor's Mailbag. So everything under the sun related to breast cancer and health and nutrition and vegan diets, anything you want to ask, tomorrow is your opportunity to do that. So join us right back here at noon Eastern for that. But until then, that is all the time that we have. A huge debt of gratitude once again to the one and only the extraordinary Dr. Kristi Funk and to the crew behind the scenes that makes this show happen. Thank you guys so very much for making this message possible. And to you who is watching, my exam roomie, appreciate you being here more than you will ever possibly know. For everyone here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thank you so very much for watching today. And remember, stay safe, take a stand, and keep it plant-based.